Thank you for joining me for another Quick Hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn, aka Mental MacGyver. I provide concierge high-performance support and coaching to executives, founders, celebrities, and athletes. With me today, I have Tara Faragian. She is the executive director of Transitions in Motherhood, where they distribute diapers, baby wipes, clothes, and food. I have Catarina von Maydell. She helps business leaders build disruptive business models and define key leverage points to create powerful change and impact using a process of systemic, organizational, and human evolution. If you want different, lead different. And I have Jim Tam. He is a principal client director at Korn Ferry's Digital Group, where he advises organizations on how to improve their sales effectiveness using world-class sales methodology and technology. The question I have today: what do you do when you know someone is cheating? Jim, what do you think?
I thought a little bit about this question. Of course, you got to think about money. When I think about cheating, to me, it only matters if there's money on the line or there's something at stake. And most of the time, I think about golf. I would say 90% of people that don't know the game very well will cheat a little bit, maybe take a mulligan or use the foot wedge, reposition the ball before they hit it again. And you don't really mind it unless there's money on the line. When there's money on the line, then you start calling people out, right? But I always like to think that they don't know the rules, or they're just naive and they don't know that what they're doing is naturally not considered cheating. One time I was playing pool with somebody and they shot the white ball in and there was money on the line and she just thought, okay, I'll just take it out and just do it. She shot the black ball in, which automatically makes you lose, but she didn't know the rules. And then I said, well, it's time to pay up. It's like, what do you mean? But she didn't know. So we just did a do-over. So if they don't know, you just educate them and use it as a coaching moment. But if they know and they were just trying to wiggle out of paying, then I'll call them out on it.
Okay. Katarina, what came up for you?
What came up for me is, first of all, I think, Jim, the points that you make are really important, is that we always have to think about what their intentions are when they're cheating or when we perceive that they're cheating. And we also have to think about what the impact is on us. So I always divide everything in terms of palliative, preventative. So palliative is how do we deal with things in the moment and make sure that we are reducing the risks to ourselves, our businesses, or whatever the context is. And then the preventative is what do we do over the longer term to make sure that doesn't happen again. And then we also have to divide it based on personal impact versus professional impact. Cheating is often very complex. I think when people cheat, there's so many contexts and so many reasons for it. It can be cultural, it can be not knowing the rules, it can be because they're feeling really under pressure that they have to win. There's so many different reasons that people cheat. And sometimes it's entitlement, sometimes it's other reasons.
I had a totally different look on the question itself. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I provide individual therapies. I thought of it in the context of a client maybe disclosing infidelity in a relationship. From a clinical standpoint, this is totally different. As a therapist, it's really creating a space of no judgment and allowing someone the safety to reveal what's going on. And it may be the first time they've even told anybody. So just really honoring that space and trust to disclose. As a therapist, you only need to break that confidentiality if there is a danger to self or others. It's more likely that I have to hold this kind of secret, sacred space to allow them process and understand where that behavior is coming from. Maybe what are the needs that are not being met in the relationship.
And you're right, because for me, how I handle it with a client is completely different than how I handle it in my personal life. With a client, I go into motivational interviewing mode and start asking them questions like, okay, you're behaving in this way. How is that affecting you? What do you expect to have happen? What do you think your outcomes are going to be? And we start investigating it with curiosity. Whereas when I was a volleyball player, if someone started cheating, I was like, look, if you want to cheat to win, we'll just stop keeping score and we'll start doing some practice rounds, because I'm not playing with you if you're going to cheat to win. I was really harsh about it on a volleyball court. Either we don't keep score or we play fair. Those were the two options.
It's funny because when I was looking at the question, I was trying to think of a business example and I couldn't, because there's so many things in business that's also almost like accepted. You do whatever you can to kind of get the inside edge. So let's say there was an RFP that was issued. And it's supposed to be jump ball in an RFP. But if I have a relationship with somebody within the company, I'm going to call that person and try to get as much insight about that company as possible. Is that an unfair advantage? Absolutely. Is that considered cheating? Probably not. There's less tolerance, I think, if you're personally impacted by someone cheating.
I think in a business sense, an example is fraud. When somebody's funneling money off, that's cheating. And I've had a client who had their bookkeeper, like she had one store that was just not doing well and she couldn't figure out why. And then she realized the bookkeeper was funneling money off of that store into their personal account. That's cheating, and that's a big deal. And so let's say, for example, you learn someone was doing something like that in a business that you had nothing to do with. How would you handle it? I mean, obviously, Tara, if you learn it in a clinical setting, you can't say anything. But other than that, if you learn about it outside of a clinical setting, how do you handle it?
Depends on the relationship you've got with the different people. So if it's not affecting you personally, but you're aware of it, then you have to think about who's being hurt, what's your relationship to them, what's the cost to you for saying anything to anybody, regardless of how well handled it is. I think there's a lot of things to consider in that situation, because even if you're doing the right thing, it doesn't always work out well or work out the way it should, because it comes down to power almost.
I think in your example, that's crime. To me, that's like a severe form of cheating. I don't even put it cheating, because cheating to me is, I guess, maybe a little less criminal. If somebody takes the line at the movie theater, is that cheating? Probably, but so what? But what you're talking about, fraud, that's criminal.
Another point that I think I'm hearing too is the relation that you have with the individual. And so knowing the full context and maybe even being very investigatory yourself before you broach any kind of a conversation or stance. Maybe even consulting other colleagues in confidence to say, this is going on. What do you feel is the best way to handle this situation? And being so considerate of the impacts that it has on people, businesses.
Catarina, you made a point of the risk to you. And there is. If you start calling people out for bad behavior, things you don't think are ethical, cheating, there's risk. And how you manage that is important in the process, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if something is blatantly illegal, you really do have to, depending on what environment you're working in, depending on the rules of that industry, depending on the rules of that community, depending on your status in that community and that industry, there's always repercussions for everybody, even if you're doing the right thing. Like it really, it's never quite so black and white.
And in criminal cases, lying by omission, just you knew but you didn't say anything, is also a problem.
That's right.
Depending on what industry, probably.
Yeah, I think also morality and ethics also comes in. I mean, you have the severe fraud, and that's criminal. But then that's doing the wrong thing, even though you may not get caught. That's considered cheating too.
And Jim, I think you mentioned it. There's a cultural aspect into what's cheating and what's just taking the best advantage, and that's what people are supposed to do. Different cultures view it very differently, I think.
Absolutely. Some of these other countries, bribes are expected.
But they're not considered a negative thing. Like the perception of them is that's just the cost of business. And that's my reward for having earned the status to get here so I can get the bribe.
I'm like a taxation, like this is the tax for I'm allowing you to do business with me. And I help bring you to this place of sale.
And I think with global business, that's becoming a challenge. Go ahead, Catarina.
One of the joys of the world that we live in now is that we have a lot more choice as to who we do business with. So there's a lot of times what I've seen in business, in the environments that I've worked in, there have been things that have been very clearly cheating, meaning gray zone, and sometimes possibly even illegal or straying beyond just sort of a gray zone, but nothing was done about it. So it's an environment where, for legal costs and reputational costs and many other reasons, people generally don't pursue a lot of really questionable activity. But what the repercussions to the people who are cheating is that they often are not able to do business with a lot of other people. So it's that door's closed. There's very informal mechanism where people end up paying a price. And that's another thing that you need to think about is which circle are you in? Which circle do you want to be in? And so those are the reputational repercussions for calling out people who are cheating or doing unethical things. It's not just a matter of morals or legal actions. I think there's other factors to consider as well.
Well, this conversations make it very clear that this is very gray, and none of us have a really this is how it works kind of line, unless we're talking about sports. And even then it depends upon what's happening. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for having this conversation with me, and I look forward to speaking to each of you again very soon.